Welcome back to Collab Farm, the podcast where we talk about all the ways small and mid-scale farmers can work together, even in big $10 million food system rebuilding kinds of ways, like this conversation that I had with Lexi Close from Appalachian Regional Cooperative Development and the Appalachian Producers Co-op. Now, Lexi's involved with much of the work going on in a cooperative beef processing facility that's currently under construction in Washington County in eastern Tennessee. We get into how the project got started from the initial idea to the feasibility studies to raising such a large amount of capital. We also get into how the membership works, including some collective marketing opportunities for local producer members for the eastern Tennessee region, and what these decentralized processing networks look like as much as 100 years ago. What we lost in centralization and how they can serve as a model for building them back. You know, it's not like they don't exist elsewhere either, because she also mentions how they're still alive today in Italy, calling back to the conversation that I had and a rebroadcast with Chris Bodner, which was totally a happy accident. I didn't plan that one at all. But first, let's get a word from some of the folks who support this show. This episode is brought to you by Grow Organic. In our no-till community, we understand that quality growing supplies and selection make all the difference. As the nation's largest independent retailer dedicated to regenerative and sustainable agriculture, Peace Valley Farm and Garden Supply is your one-stop shop, offering 5,000 reliable products, including cover crops, soil amendments, tools, and more. Serving market farmers since 1976, it's before I was born, they understand the needs of growers, both big and small. Save 20% on your first order now with code NOTIL24. That's NOTIL 24. Apply for a commercial account for year-round savings and dedicated support. Visit groworganic.com/notill or use the link down in the description to get started today. This episode is also brought to you by ASAP, the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project. The Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, ASAP, will offer the Business of Farming Conference on Saturday, February 22nd in the beautiful Asheville, North Carolina. This annual conference brings together professional and aspiring farmers from across the Southeast to network and share resources to build viable farm businesses. Scholarship for BIPOC and limited resource farmers are available, as well as discounts for farm partners registering together. Absolutely love to see that. Registration opens in mid-November. Find out more at asapconnections.org. That's asapconnections.org. All right, back to the show. So yeah, Lexi Close with the APC. Thank you for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited that we made this work.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little background. We met and talked last year at the Tennessee Local Food Summit. And I thought that the project that you're working on was brilliant. It kind of highlights the upper end or the higher end work that we could be doing in food system development cooperatively. You know, a lot of what I like to focus on is how can farmers work together on small projects. But I really like this food system scale work that is cooperative, that could be beneficial for not only a number of growers, but, you know, really building a food system. So yeah, let me back up a little bit, Lexi. If you want to introduce yourself, tell us, you know, who you work with, what you do, and a little bit about the project you're working on.
Yeah, so I work for a nonprofit, the Appalachian Resource Conservation and Development Council, which is quite a long name, ARCD for short. And we have been acting as the fiscal sponsors for the Appalachian Producers Cooperative since, I think, August of 2021, I think is when we got roped into this. ARCD just celebrated its 30th anniversary a couple of weekends ago. So we've been around in the community for a long time. I've been here about 10 years. My role, like right now, primarily is in grant writing, which is really what I've done a lot of for the APC. And, but I do a lot of community organizing. I do project management stuff. So I wear a lot of hats, but the APC cooperatives are considered nonprofits in the state of Tennessee, which is why they were able to use a nonprofit fiscal sponsor before they got their official status in the state. So they worked with us to fundraise the initial money, and we kind of sat on that in our bank account. And we're working with an architectural firm to get the first designs out and doing a lot of research how to just build these kind of smaller facilities. There's a lot of information, especially like from the USDA, on like plans for huge processing facilities, but these kind of blueprints for smaller facilities, I mean, you really have to like do the work yourself. So I think the team visited probably at least 3, if not more, small facilities in the Southeast. And it was really cool, even though those facilities were not structured as cooperatives, it was really cool how they just like opened their books up. They sent us home with copies of their architectural drawings. They were letting us talk with their architectural firms. They were really just like, we would tour their facilities and they would say like, I wish I had done this differently. Like this was a big mistake, or like this is really working well, or like I paid all this money for this thing and actually we're just using handsaws, like, so it's really cool. Like, even though they aren't cooperatives, they were really kind of participating in the spirit, that kind of cooperative spirit, cooperation amongst cooperative spirit, which was really cool. And I think that the ABC will definitely continue that moving forward. I think University of Tennessee had a study out that was sort of the inspiration for this whole project. I think maybe 2012, 2013, they put out a study saying that the state of Tennessee needed at least 9 of these facilities doing 5,000 or 6,000 head a year processing to really kind of meet the needs for local processing across the state. So University of Tennessee did a feasibility study for kind of a hypothetical facility in the state. And then some of the early folks on this project team in 2017 asked them to be more specific about a facility located in Washington County, Tennessee, where we're based out of. So they did this study and said that the facility, if it were built, would run in the black, but the profit margins were pretty small. So the initial project team, which was actually some local political leaders, like the mayor of Washington County at that time was involved, and extension. There was an extension agent who's still with this as kind of a huge advocate for moving this along, and local farmers, the Cattlemen's Association especially, were sort of involved. And they actually took this feasibility study and they tried to find investors, private investors to put the money up to build this facility. But they were told several times that the profit margins were too small and that it wasn't worth building for, private investors to get into. But it was still really important to the farmers. So that's, I think, where the idea for this to be a cooperative was formed. So that was 2017, and they were sort of kind of working on this. But again, like there wasn't really the money for it yet. And it was just kind of a project that was always kind of on the back burner for these folks. And then the pandemic hit in 2020 and meat processing, the whole system ground to a halt. And so farmers couldn't get their, this area is mostly like cow calf operations and backgrounding operations. So, these calves are getting sold, between 600 and 900 pounds to other parts of the food system, mainly, the Midwest, where they're kind of finished and processed out there. So people were suddenly stuck with a bunch of animals that they couldn't really afford to feed, or, and so they were trying to get animals processed locally. And that sort of just ground everything to a halt here. People were waiting, 18 to 24 months for appointments, which a lot of times they were making appointments for animals that weren't born yet, just to kind of get in line for that time. Or they were driving, out of state to Kentucky or to South Carolina or further to get appointments. And so that really was kind of, the start of, we need to do something. And so they became more serious about organizing and getting in the paperwork for a cooperative. And then all the ARPA, the American American Rescue Plan for all the COVID money that came through. And so suddenly there was a lot of money being invested in grants for meat processing. And that's really when it started. The county, Washington County, decided that it was very important to invest in the agricultural sector. So they put in $2 million of their ARPA funding, the county funds. They decided to dedicate 10% of their money to agriculture. So we weren't the only project that received some of this funding, but so we got $2 million, and that $2 million allowed me to go out and seek these grants that were coming out. There was the MPEP, the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program. We got funding through the Appalachian Regional Commission and the ARC Power Grant. And there were 2 state programs that were, one pot of that was from the states. The state allocated like $40 million to the Tennessee Department of Ag from their ARPA funding. So they were giving out grants. We got $1 million of that. And then the state put in state money, another pot of money. I think they called it from their agricultural enterprise fund, put in another $1 million. So we were able to leverage that initial $2 million into to a total of $7.6 million. And that allowed the APC to get a loan from a bank, from a regular bank. And that loan, about $4.5 million, was also backed by a USDA rural development guarantee. So the USDA has invested fairly significantly into this project. So, which, it's a unique moment in time, right? Like, I don't know, will this money ever be available again coming down the line? But it really, and I think part of our thought was like, there's a lot of pushback, like people like, you're getting grants, like you're getting government handouts, like this isn't fair. And it's like, well, that money is like going out into the world. It's being spent. And it's like, my feeling as a grant writer is that we're going to get our share. Right. So I want part of that money to come to Northeast Tennessee and get invested in our agricultural community here. So, so that grant writing has been, 2.5, 3 years process. I had a kid. I went on maternity leave for part of that. So it's really been like a chunk of my life has been devoted to this project. So,
sounds like it. And I think what that highlights is the importance. Well, it seems like you had 2 critical pieces there. And one was that feasibility study. Proof of concept.
Yeah. Well, and that really set us up. Sorry to interrupt, but that feasibility study, like the MPEP grant, the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program, I believe the window for that first round of funding was like 45 days that you had time to get your application in, and they required a feasibility study. So there's no way to get a feasibility study in 45 days, right? If you didn't have one, if you weren't sitting on one. So it really allowed us to get that first big grant, plus the money that the county had given us, allowed us to leverage that match. So yeah, that feasibility study was so key.
Yeah. Well, and then the other half of that is having some sort of investment up front to have somebody like yourself to be able to chase down and flag down all of these opportunities by the USDA, by the state, to be able to leverage what's out there for this particular project. And I think that's a big piece of it too, is a lot of times I feel like when producers come together to do some sort of cooperative work or cooperative development, they feel like all of the onus is on themselves, or that they have to do all of the work. But then being able to leverage a toehold financially to have a point person, an administrator to do that work. I mean, like you said, you turned $2 million into seven point something million dollars because you have people who are dedicated to work on the project itself.
Yeah, and that's something that we as an organization, like the ARCD, is thinking about. How can we do this again? On whatever scale that it comes up. So that's something like looking forward, we're thinking strategically about, like, how do we leverage, more of this in our region, for not just meat, but like, fruits and vegetables, processing, aggregation, distribution, infrastructure, for forestry products, for fiber, whatever it is, just trying to figure out um, how we can do it and how we can sustain the work. Because, we are a nonprofit, we're largely grant and donation dependent. So it's kind of you know, we want to be of service, but we also want to like keep the lights on too. So that's like this whole thing. And I will say, yeah, and that was a big discussion, like initially, because the old models for cooperatives, there are existing producer cooperatives in the state of Tennessee, like the Tennessee Farmers Cooperative, which runs seed and feed stores, feed and seed stores, whatever it is, in each county across the state. And so they're part of so each store is its own cooperative that was sort of founded independently, and they're part of a network of these stores that cooperate together. So we had the charter for the Washington County. We got the original charter for the Washington County Farmers Co-op, and we're looking at that. And it was started on like $10. Every farmer pitched in like $10 initially. Back in like the 1930s or 1940s, and that was a big deal. And they started this co-op together. And, we were talking, there was a huge discussion about how we were going to raise money from individual farmer members in this process. And like people, the expectation that people would invest. And then we started seeking out, advice and legal support from experts in cooperative law and in starting cooperatives, because there actually wasn't anyone alive in Tennessee that had ever started a producers cooperative. It was the first one in like over 50 years. So there's plenty of advice and support and technical expertise on how to run a cooperative in Tennessee, but nothing on how to start them. And so, we went to a bunch of people and basically we're told, you don't start cooperatives that way anymore. Like the members aren't required to cough up all the money anymore to start the thing. Like getting bank loans is pretty much how it is, because and on the back end, like it's kind of a financial and accounting nightmare to deal with. 300 people have contributed money and they all want 5% on that investment or whatever it is, versus like dealing with one bank loan. So but that's also tricky with a cooperative to get a bank to lend to a cooperative without asking the members to put their assets on the line as collateral, because they aren't going to be. It's not like a private business where you put your assets on collateral for bank loan because it's your business and you're going to be making the profits off of it. Like the current membership isn't going to be receiving that kind of financial benefit. So so we did find a bank that did not require the members to put the initial members. There's currently the board are currently the only members, although that's going to open up real soon because we're nearing completion of the facility. So the membership structure is being finalized, and so there's going to be opened up. I think the membership's just going to be $30 a year, plus some requirements that you have to be an active user of the facility and other things, because the state law requires you can't. I think at least 85% of the membership of a producers cooperative has to use the thing that is being cooperatively owned in order for it to maintain its cooperative status in Tennessee.
So you've got these members that have come together that have identified themselves as being participants in this facility or producers for this facility in this cooperative. You've got the funding elements and you're in the building process. So you have the feasibility study, someone like yourself to put all the pieces together and get the funding together. One, I think it's very cool that you got the mayor involved, and I think that's like, if you have a large enough cooperative project, go to city officials, go to city council meetings and see if that's something that you can gauge interest about, because it's going to be a huge help to the county and to the farmer, the economy of the county.
Well, I think we did the math on like the ag census, and like 49-50% of the land in Washington County is in agricultural usage. Like, that's really significant, like.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, that's a large portion of a county's use. But then, so walk us through a little bit about how, to the extent that you all have it figured out, participants are going to engage with this facility. And then beyond that, does all of the product go back to the farmers? Is there going to be any sort of like co-marketing element or market development? I was really curious about that. I don't know the extent that we got into that the last time.
Yeah, so the membership will be fairly open, just because of that 85% requirement. So it'll be pretty easy to be a member, and the usage of the facility will the minimum usage will be pretty low, like maybe 5 animals a year or something like that. And remember, it'll be fairly straightforward. There'll be a board. So the facility will be run day to day by a general manager. And the board will be made up by members, and there'll be an election cycle. And so once the facility is open, they'll be cycling off over a period of 3 years, I think, of the original board members, and they'll be elected by the membership at an annual meeting. So that'll be the way that members stay engaged. And then once the facility starts making profit, and once those loans are paid down or paid off at a certain point, then the membership will start receiving patronage based on the amount that they use the facility and the amount of income that they generate for the facility. So I think current projections, once the facility's at that kind of 5,000 to 6,000 head a year, full capacity for the facility, about half of their production is expected to be fee-for-service processing, so that the farmer will retain ownership over the final product, and that it'll be USDA inspected, so they can take it as long as they have the appropriate permits with the Tennessee Department of Ag. They'll be able to resell that product to pretty much anybody. So consumers or restaurants, or even retail establishments if they want it, but that's individually. And then the cooperative also intends to have a cooperatively owned brand of meat sales. So they'll actually be purchasing finished livestock from local farmers on contract. So the animals will be grown to specifications, and they're working on getting a grading process with the USDA. And so I don't think, from what I've heard, take a drink of water. I don't think there's currently any facility in Tennessee that has a USDA grader. And while the inspection process is free, so long as you don't get into like overtime hours, you stay under 40 hours a week for that inspector at your facility. It's free to the facilities to be USDA inspected, but I don't think it's free to be graded. Like, it costs, you have to pay for that person. But the USDA is apparently piloting a digital grading service wherein you just take pictures and you send them to somebody at the USDA, and they will grade them visually and send you back a grade. And it's like it costs, so much an hour, and there's like a minimum, like a half hour or something. So you want to send a certain number of pictures to them to make sure you're getting at least half an hour of work out of them or whatever. Getting a little bit in weeds, but so they'll be able to grade beef and be able to sell, and they'll be able to turn around and pay farmers, choice and prime rates, if they're able to do that. And we're also working very closely with University of Tennessee Extension. They have arranged to have an area specialist in the region who specializes in cattle, nutrition, husbandry, genetics, all that, and so can help folks make sure that they have the genetics in order to, and the feeding knowledge, so that they can get animals to Choice and Prime, and so that money, so they're gonna, the cooperative plans to pay a premium for the animal anyway, and then on top of that, you'll get more if you can get them to a Choice or a grade, or a Choice or a Prime grading. And so that'll be about 50% of the production. Will be purchased by the cooperative from a bunch of different farmers in the region. They will be processed and sold under the cooperative brand to, larger grocery stores and restaurants. And so the cooperative will undertake that marketing and branding costs. So farmers, if they don't want to deal with that direct to consumer, if they don't want to be out there hustling, and there's no one else really in the region doing this, right? So the market for local meat is just totally wide open, especially for a larger player to take on this aggregation part of it. And so it's allowing farmers to access, much larger markets than they could individually, especially because Northeast Tennessee, we're in the Appalachian region. It's very mountainous. Our farms are on average less than half the size of the state average for farms. I think it's average of about 90-acre farms here. So it's really, we don't have the 5,000-acre, Texas ranch kind of farms here. So it really requires farmers working together in order to be able to access those markets, because there's a lot of cows in the region. I think according to the census, the USDA Ag Census, there's something like 400,000 cows within a 2-hour radius of this facility. But again, most of those are not, and I think only about 6% of them are being processed locally. 94% of them are being sold as calves into commodity markets into the Midwest. They're being, and they're being sold, I don't know what calf prices are right now, but, I hear it's good. So maybe $2 a pound, so they're selling, a 600 to 900 pound animal, for commodity prices. They're getting, so maybe you're getting $1,400 to $1,800. They're being sold to the Midwest. They're being finished. They're being processed out there. And what's the value of 450, 500 pounds of meat, at retail prices? You're looking, $4,000 to $6,000 in value. And so this cooperative is really allowing folks to capture that remaining value on those animals. But again, 6% of animals that are born in Tennessee are processed in Tennessee. But even if farmers wanted to process more, there's not the capacity right now. This facility is going to double the USDA inspected processing capacity in Northeast Tennessee by itself. There's three smaller facilities in the region that folks are accessing.
Yeah. And then presumably, the 94% of the animals that are leaving the state of Tennessee, some of that is coming back to feed people in Tennessee, not far from where the facility is going to be located.
Yeah.
So why not capture and ground that money in Eastern Tennessee?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One of the pieces that you brought up that I think is really fascinating is the addition of technical assistance in with this entire process for the farmers to be able to manage their operations maybe more efficiently, but also get a higher quality product to make sure that that higher profit margin is maintained or for sales.
Yeah, because everything's geared to getting an animal to 900 pounds.
Yeah,
not to 1,400. So it's a whole different, it's a longer term, and it's it takes a lot of input, and you really want, there's been the state of Tennessee has some cost share programs, and the cattle cost share program is probably one of the most popular. So the state has invested pretty significantly into herd genetics thus far. And so really being able to capture that investment. And that's one of the pitches we made, to the Tennessee Department of Ag when we were applying for these grants. It's you've been investing in these animals, in these herds. So let's push that further out and finish them here and have them for local consumers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food, not spend time creating pack lists, writing newsletters, responding to emails, maintaining web stores. Look, if I could spend less time on my phone and my computer and more time actually farming, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. It takes care of all the admin, managing orders, customer communications, automating tedious tasks so that you can get back to doing what you love, right? On average, farmhand saves CSA farmers about 6 hours a week. That 6 hours you could, I don't know, spend time with your family, get back out into the field, or just take a breather. So what would you do with those extra 6 hours? Now is the time to get your systems ready for next season. Learn how Farmhand can help at farmhand.partners/notill. That's farmhand.partners/notill. Link is in the show notes. This episode is also brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. It is seed browsing season, and High Mowing Organic Seeds is releasing 66, not 65, not 67, 66 new seed varieties for 2025 on November 1st. These beautiful and productive vegetable, flower, and herb varieties are 100% organic and non-GMO and trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. Now, I don't know about you. I follow NOP guidelines and order organic seeds, partially because I have to. But it's very easy to look through their catalog and know that everything is clear and safe for me to order. Just a side note, whether you're trying to bring the best to your CSA, wholesale customers of the farmer's market, High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingorganicseeds.com to request a catalog. Use code NOTILL25, that's NOTILL25 for 10% off of your order of $100 or more. Again, visit highmowingseeds.com. All right, let's get back to the show. All of this sounds great. What are some of the biggest bottlenecks or challenges that you think you have come up against in this entire project from your position particularly?
I think the land was a big issue. The first huge bottleneck, because a meat processor, it's fairly restricted zoning wise where you can put a meat processor down. There's not a lot of zones, land that's zoned for meat processing. There were a couple different designations, and we initially tried to get the facility into one of the industrial sites in the county, but there wasn't. It was all bought up. All the sites were already claimed. So we tried to. There was a farmer on the board. One of the members had a piece of property, like a 5-acre parcel that he was just hanging, that was immediately adjacent to one of the plots on the industrial park. And it should be relatively straightforward to rezone a piece of property if you're rezoning it to the thing that's next to it. So that zone that you want is adjacent. It should be fairly straightforward. However, anytime you say you're going to put a meat process, you have to tell them what you're going to do with the land. And so that becomes public notice. And so people just immediately get up in arms. They like the not in my backyard, the NIMBYs don't want. I think in theory they like the idea of a meat processor, but there's absolutely no piece of property that is ever going to get rezoned for meat processing. You can say all day long, like, it's not going to smell like, you grew up in the 70s next to a meat processor and it stank, but you can't do that anymore. Like, you can't, like, there's so much regulation these days. Like, you can't start a new meat processor and like stink up the place like that, because it just can't happen. But you can't tell that to people. They don't believe you. And then like weird rumors are getting around, like the facility was going to just be like euthanizing animals out in the parking lot with guns and like that. It's just, so that became, I think we made it through like 3 or 2 county commission meetings, and you need like 3 to get a piece of land rezoned. So it didn't, it just died. But we were able to find another piece of property that had the correct zoning, that was fairly nearby. However, we're having to pay, and working with the county to get water and sewer because it's on the other side of the highway. And so like we had to like, go through the process of permitting and getting like pipes bored under a state highway, which is a lot. So like the utility, it wasn't an ideal piece other than it was zoned correctly. So we didn't have to go through this process of rezoning. You could just build it there. So I think that, for anyone looking to do a meat processor, like, you have to start with a piece of land that is zoned correctly, and that is the only thing that matters. You can get utilities out to that piece of property, whatever it costs, but and there have been other instances within Tennessee that we had heard of that they couldn't get um, the rezoning done. It also died at the rezoning. And then I think, it's all well and good. I think I'm up to like 8.2 million in grants. But a lot of these things are reimbursement based. So I think the major bottleneck right now is just cash flow, and the paperwork involved in the grant reimbursement process, So like really having to stay on top of that in order that you spend the money, you get reimbursed for a portion of it, and that immediately goes out into, those things. So I think just trying to make it to February 2025 when this facility will hopefully be done and opened, with cash flow has really been, and that's normally not my forte, but I'm the grant manager, and so really having to very tightly control, or to stay involved in all these discussions on cash flow, and it's not sexy, but it's gonna get there, and having that kind of community expertise. We're in Northeast Tennessee. It's really amazing. The number of professionals in this region who also are cattle farmers, and they're not huge herds. They may have 20 20 mother cows, and a cow calf operation, or, I think there's a few people on the board who are really big operations, 500 plus head that they're farming. But a lot of folks are very small and they're doing it part-time, but they're also accountants or they're lawyers or they're, whatever. And they are not on the board and they're not yet members in the organization, but they've been really integral. So we have a really sharp CPA who has been really handling a lot of this cash flow stuff, which is, I don't know that this project would have made it without that expertise on it. So yeah, not just myself as like a grant writer and a grant manager, but just the community that has come up around this project, because we all really want to see it happen. And because it is a cooperative, it's not, it's not benefiting just one person. It's like the whole community. It's an investment in the agricultural community, in the agricultural economy, in the future of agriculture in, Northeast Tennessee.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's going to benefit the larger producers as well as the smaller producers. So it's like instead of this dichotomy of like large versus small, you've actually set up a system by design that benefits both of them. And then you're also relying on any sort of expert. Whenever you have a membership base, instead of maybe a private organization, you're really able to leverage some of the other skills, talents, and traits that the other folks have, that the membership have, that it also benefits them to contribute, right? So it's redesigning the systems to leverage all the good parts, everybody benefits together, and then it makes space for everybody else's.
And it's, I think there's also this experience already. A lot of these folks were involved or are involved one way or other with the farmers co-op in each county. So they've already served on the board, for the co-op for some period of time, or they're members of that co-op. So they know, like they're already familiar with the structure. This wasn't like a new thing for these folks. Like they were sort of building on this existing producers cooperative community to make this happen. I think that was important too. It's not unfamiliar. It's not a new cultural language that they're learning about how to be part of a cooperative and work together. They all kind of see the value of it already, and are just making a new kind of offshoot of that rather than a whole new plant, I guess, right?
So some of the things that you had mentioned as we were setting this interview up was like, so when I hear you say that, I think about, in my part of Kentucky, a lot of the medium scale producers and large scale producers deal with their cooperatives to buy feed and seed. So they still kind of have that, at least remnants of that sort of culture or that mentality to some extent. At least on that side of their operation. But you had mentioned that you've been looking into like what did this look like 50 years ago in at least your part of the country? What did you find about Like, what was the food system in East Tennessee like in the 50s and the 60s as opposed to now?
Yeah. So, I mean, what started this was I did some math. I think the average beef consumption for the average American is like 56 pounds a year. And so this facility is going to be able to produce enough beef to meet 100% of the beef consumption needs of about 50,000 people, which seems like a pretty big deal, right? But there's 130,000 people just in Washington County. So you'd need like two and a half of these facilities in order to just do beef, and that, there's all kinds of other meat, which, this facility will do some pork and some lamb, but there's all kinds of things that people eat, not just meat, grain and dairy and fruits and vegetables and cooking fats, all this stuff. And just thinking, from what I've heard prior, and so there's currently no other meat processing done in Washington County right now. So this will be the first one in probably 40 years. But prior to like the 1980s, from what I've gathered, there were at least 3 meat processors operating in Washington County. And so those closed, and there was kind of this deliberate consolidation of our food system, this kind of get big or get out. And a lot of folks just had to get out. A lot of the smaller local infrastructure, these small businesses got out. They weren't able to handle the consolidation and this kind of aggregation of our food system to a small handful of mega corporations. So in order to, and this facility, it's about 8 million in grants and 4 million in loans. I mean, this is $12 million to build this one facility. We really, in order to meet 100% of our beef needs, would need, 2.5 of these or, whatever. So how much money does it cost to rebuild, these 3 facilities that used to be here? And that sort of got me into this larger question of like, well, there's a lot of old mill roads, so and so Mill Road, all around. And in 1980, the Ag Census counted 100 operating dairy farms just in Washington County, just our county. And I think maybe 5 years ago there were 4. I'm pretty sure there's just 2 right now. There's 2 operating dairies in Washington County. And that milk, and this is probably a tangent, but, we just got hit by Hurricane Helene back in September. And so dealing with that. So I know these dairies were selling to a grocery store chain called Ingles, which is based out of North Carolina. And that facility that they were processing milk got like wiped out, by this hurricane. And so these farms, the one I was talking to, he had about 3 days worth of storage. And he was hours away from having to start dumping milk when Ingles arranged from some company in like Baltimore, Maryland to come pick up this milk. So I don't think he had to dump any milk out. The truck arrived from Baltimore to start carting this milk up the East Coast for this company. So like these small farms or these farms are now quite large farms, and they're trucking milk across mountains or up the East Coast. And I don't know how much longer they'll last. Like, how much does it cost to ship milk that far? And like, what is the farmer actually getting paid if the company is taking off all that shipping costs to it? So anyway, so I've been doing some research on like what used to be here, because you have to think, prior to World War I, probably almost everything we were consuming was grown and processed and sold here. Like, we weren't really shipping it anywhere. And so between the 1920s and 1980, like, what happened to our food system? And it's not just prior to 1980. A lot of this infrastructure closed in the 90s and the 2000s, right? And so I've got a friend who's an archivist, and hopefully we'll start digging into some archival information, because right now I'm limited to what I can find on the internet. But there are definitely plants that closed in the age of the internet, and I can see, from the Greenville Sun, 1998, the Moody Dunbar Moody. I can't quite remember. It was a pepper processing plant. They were growing peppers in Greene County, and they were processing them at their cannery there. And I think the company is still headquartered in Northeast Tennessee, but they are not manufacturing anything here. Like, their plants are maybe in North Carolina, maybe California. But that closed in 1998. That we were still canning peppers here, and then Pet Milk. They had a facility in Kingsport, Tennessee, that closed in 2009. And so, like, that probably was like, things were kind of, it was already like the 80s were kind of the beginning of the end. But, like, I mean, how many dairies closed, went belly up 2009, 2010, once that facility was no longer purchasing that milk, because milk is expensive to ship. It's heavy, it's expensive to ship. So, and we're not processing these the Pet Milk still exists, but it's not processing in Tennessee anymore. And you kind of find that over and over and over again. There was a grain mill, St. John's Mill in Watauga, Tennessee, that when it closed in 1996, it was the oldest operating business in the state of Tennessee. So hundreds of years, this mill was producing grain, or producing flour, cornmeal, and it only closed in 1996. That's pretty phenomenal to me, that how recently we have lost the capacity to feed ourselves. We're so reliant on these, like, global supply chains and these mega conglomerate foreign owned companies, that when there is a crisis, not just a pandemic, but a plant fire there's only like 50 meat processing plants that produce, 80 to 90+% of our meat supply. So, like, one of these plants that's on fire, like 5% of our meat supply disappears, until they can fix it. Or, like, was it JBS had a cyber attack and shut down for several weeks? Like, that was, I don't know, 25, 30% of our, like, meat supply, our national meat supply was, like, offline until they got their computers back. Like, it's kind of mind-boggling that we've allowed ourselves to do that. But the cost of decentralizing and reinvesting in this infrastructure is just incredible. And yet I got into agriculture. My degree's in international development. But I took a break after my master's degree. I sort of got burnt out on, like, academia, and I went and woofed, which I feel like a lot of people in agriculture know what woofing is, but I say that to some people and they're like, what are you talking about? But worldwide opportunities on organic farms, it's like work stays on farms, you get room and board. And so I woofed in Italy and the UK and Belgium for 7 months, farm to farm. And in Italy, especially, they never dismantled their infrastructure for these small farms, and it's all cooperatives too. It's really cool. Every little town had their, they're cooperatively producing their wine and cooperatively producing their cheese and the olive oil, like and the farmer had the option to just pay to have it processed, and then they could take it home and sell it, or consume it, or they could sell it to the cooperative, based on whatever payment structure that was going on. But it was cool to, like, see that functioning and that kind of small scale processing infrastructure that these communities felt was important, the government felt was important, and so they never dismantled it, and it was still functioning. Whereas we took it all apart and we sold it off, and to get that back, to get that decentralized system back, is going to be incredibly expensive if we want to do that. And so, like, this is a nonprofit that's interested in local food systems. I I want to kind of create this map, kind of create this knowledge about like what was here to allow people to really see like what the future, what the possibilities for the future could look like, right? Right now, I don't know that people can imagine that we could process our own dairy, that we could process our own flour, that we could process our own fruits and vegetables with cooking fats, all of that. Like it's hard to comprehend anymore. But I think saying like, seeing the map, populated, and I like drawing maps for whatever reason. It's just like something I like doing. So I made this like 4 foot by 6 foot map for our 30th anniversary event, and I was there like kind of crowdsourcing. Like I was maybe a little um targeting folks that looked a little older, and I was like, are you from here? Are you from Northeast Tennessee? And, the folks that said yes, I was like, what do you remember? What do you remember as a kid? Did your parents talk about getting their milk delivered? And so I was kind of crowdsourcing. And one of the folks there, like, they had seen me kind of talk about it on Facebook. And so they had sat down with their parents, who are, probably in their 80s. And they came to me with this like handwritten list of, 15 or 20 mills, and meat processors and dairies that they remember, from their corner of Washington County, like back in the day. And so people have been like giving me these like handwritten notes now, and it's really cool. And I'm trying to get it all compiled. And I've got this, like I said earlier, that I've got this friend who was in her former life was an archivist. And so I think at some point we're going to start digging into pre-internet age information and really try to get a map going and really kind of understanding what it is that we lost, and what if we're working towards a future where this is. Because I think like the local food movement's a pretty big thing like across the country. I think a lot of people are in theory interested in a functioning local food system, but like what does that actually mean, and what is it going to cost to get there? I think just to be realistic, because and that money doesn't like scare me necessarily. Like I feel like it's possible to come up with money. I just manifested like over $8 million, right, for this project. Like, and maybe we're in a unique period of time and it's going to be harder to do that. But like, I just feel like having a roadmap in place of like, okay, this is what we want to see in 20, 30, 50, 100 years, and it may not be my work to finish, but I'm going to like start on it. Right. And just because it's important, like to kind of get back to this, that we're not, I feel like small, inefficient. It's inefficient, right? Like we got away from it because it was inefficient, and we wanted efficiency and we wanted cheaper food. And I think we did achieve cheaper food for a minute, but we've gone so far into the consolidation that there's no competition, and these companies can pay farmers whatever little piddly amount that they want to, and they can charge consumers as much as they want. And there's no recourse for anybody in this situation. So like these small inefficient systems kept money in local communities. It kept farms going. And it created a lot of jobs. I mean, all these milk delivery jobs and all these retail establishments and all the insurance salesmen and the feed and seed stores. And like, there was just more economic activity. There were more jobs. And not just like the kind of backbreaking agricultural labor jobs that, no one seems to want to do anymore. But that came out wrong. I don't believe people don't want to work. I believe people do want to work, but like it's hard being out there not in 95-degree weather, for 12 hours, harvesting, bent over, like lifting heavy things and on the ground and up and all this, like that's hard work. And I think a local food system not only creates those jobs, but it also, because more money is kept locally, those jobs can pay more because the whole economy is wealthier. It's generating wealth, in ways that our current system does not generate wealth for the majority of people.
Well, and those jobs go from being seen or viewed as maybe unskilled, and some of them are operated as unskilled because the pay is so low, the benefits are none, to skilled work. And maybe this is because I've been reading a lot of like Wendell Berry's fiction lately. I just got through I didn't realize he had a new set of stories out, how it went. But he's talking about like the amount of skill and the amount of care and attention that these farmers who had prospects on their land had for their farms. What does that look like in terms of resilience or being able to maintain a skilled workforce and good livelihood and just like dignity and respect for the work, you know?
Yeah, I want that back.
Yeah.
But it's going to cost a lot of money to get there, and it's not just the farms. It's not just that the work on the farms, gets the dignity and respect that it deserves, but all the infrastructure that really gets it to the consumer, the whole line of it. I mean, we talk about in the Southeast. I mean, there's this huge opioid crisis, or drug crisis, and but it's because people don't have meaningful work to do. I think there's just this hopelessness. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. There's no way to make any kind of decent living on the current options because we've outsourced it all.
We're going to need a lot more Lexi Closes doing this work. People not afraid of big numbers and to start work that maybe they're not going to see the end of. I mean, we're not going to see the end of this work for sure.
I know. I'm a little weirdo, but I'm here, like one life to live. I'm going to make the best of it. So,
yeah. Well, Lexi, thank you so much. This is a good place to wrap it up. I don't want to take any more of your time because you've got way more important things to do than this. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, letting me kind of speak my mind on all these things that I occupy myself with when I'm not great. Right?
Absolutely. No, I think this is a great example. We'll put links for everything that you mentioned in the notes. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you, Lexi. Again, thank you, Lexi, for your time. Dr. Professor Michael for making it sound so good. Farmer Michelle for connecting all the dots. Farmer Jesse for everything else. Our sponsors, Grow Organic, ASAP, Farmhand, and High Mowing. And you, our listeners, for chipping in and supporting our work over at patreon.com/notillgrowers. Because, like I always say, many hands make light work. I'll see you all in 2 weeks.